This is Mount Kailash. In ancient texts, this physical mountain is described as the meditative seat of the gods, long before human beings even began measuring time. This stone carving depicts Lord Shiva and Goddess Parvati as the embodiment of two necessary cosmic forces. Shiva represents pure consciousness and peace, while Parvati, or Shakti, is the active, creative energy that drives the universe. For centuries, human sages debated a central question: which of these two forces actually rules the universe? Many argued that the mind, pure consciousness, holds supreme power, while others insisted that without raw energy, nothing happens. A great sage named Bhringi took an extreme side in this debate. He decided to worship Shiva exclusively. He bowed only to consciousness and completely ignored Parvati, actively refusing to acknowledge the role of creative energy. Parvati saw a serious flaw in his logic. Pure consciousness is inert. A mind cannot create a world, preserve a life, or move a single stone without an active energy source to fuel the action. Bhringi's devotion was entirely out of balance. To correct this, Parvati needed to prove a specific physical reality to the mortal world. Separating consciousness from energy is as impossible as separating the heat from a fire. Think of it like this animation. The rigid grid represents consciousness, providing the blueprint, structure, and direction. But without the fluid energy wave, the grid is completely frozen. Conversely, if energy moves without structure, it is formless chaos. Knowing this, Parvati approached Shiva. She asked him to help her construct a cosmic demonstration that would end the human debate and clearly illustrate how their domains overlap. Shiva agreed. The mortal world was determined to divide existence into separate parts. To fix this, the gods needed to physically prove that their duality was an illusion, masking a single, united reality. Right there on Mount Kailash, an intense divine light engulfed them both. Gods and sages watched as Shiva and Parvati dissolved the boundaries between their physical bodies entirely. This full stone sculpture reveals Ardhanarishvara, perfectly bisected into a half-man, half-woman form. The right side features masculine iconography, strong, calm, with matted hair, a crescent moon, and trident. The left half shifts to graceful feminine traits, wearing silk garments and gently holding a lotus. Despite seeing two forces literally merged into one body, Sage Bhringi refused to accept it. His bias was so deeply ingrained, he rejected the physical evidence right in front of him. This illustrates Bhringi's ridiculous solution to his problem. He transformed himself into a tiny bee and flew in a frantic, tight circle exclusively around Shiva's right side, deliberately avoiding Parvati's left. It is a perfect metaphor for human stubbornness. Bhringi actively searched for a loophole in the absolute laws of nature, just so he could maintain his personal bias. Parvati did not strike him down for this insult. Instead, she calculated a highly precise response. She gave Bhringi exactly what he demanded, a physical existence entirely void of her influence. Since Parvati is Shakti, the active energy of the universe, she holds a very specific biological domain. She is the source of all flesh, blood, and physical vitality in a living body. As the bee circled Shiva's half, Parvati quietly withdrew her energy from Bhringi's physical form. Look at how this rigid framework suddenly crumbles to dust when its invisible binding force is entirely removed. This is exactly what happened to Bhringi. Stripped of his flesh, blood, and muscle, he was reduced to a paralyzed skeleton, physically incapable of even standing up. The collapse proved Parvati's thesis. Pure consciousness, no matter how elevated, cannot move or act without physical energy to drive it. Lying paralyzed on the floor, Bhringi finally grasped his error. Without Parvati's energy, his devotion to Shiva meant nothing, because he couldn't even stand to pray. He looked up at the united form and offered his devotion to both halves. This weathered rock carving captures the aftermath of that realization. Shiva, acting out of pure compassion for the collapsed sage, granted the skeleton a third leg, providing just enough structural support so Bhringi could stand upright again. From that moment on, Bhringi worshipped both deities equally. He had learned the hard way that existence is completely impossible without both halves functioning together. The myth resolves itself by balancing Parvati's harsh lesson in physics with Shiva's act of grace. The reality of the universe requires the energy, but it also requires the compassion to support those who stumble while trying to understand it. Ardhanarishvara serves as a structural map for the internal balance of every human being. As this animation demonstrates, you can take a hard-edged triangle and a yielding circle and slide them together to form a balanced core. Every individual utilizes both masculine traits, like logic and action, and feminine traits, like intuition and compassion, to navigate daily life. Bhringi's collapse illustrates what happens when we treat these traits as opposing enemies rather than necessary partners. When we prioritize action without empathy, or wisdom without the will to execute it, our internal systems lose their stability. True maturity only occurs when we stop trying to divide our reality. Strength requires kindness to give it purpose, and love requires boundaries to give it form. We exist because these forces work in tandem. Creation itself is sustained by unity, a law of nature perfectly captured in the sacred form of Ardhanarishvara.